Yesterday, we brought you the story of 5 children who were burnt to death when a fire ripped through 6 shacks in an informal settlement near Laudium in Pretoria. Now, it's believed their mothers left the children between the ages of 1 and 7 alone and went to a nearby tavern. We've seen these incidents in the past, and it is simply just an issue that is too difficult to comprehend. And you ask yourself, is this an issue of negligence, or is this a bigger discussion that has to be had in this particular regard? Let's now speak to the Teddy Bear Clinic Clinical Director, Dr. Shaheda Omar, who joins us live now. Dr. Omar, thank you so much for your time. You know, when you read through some of what comes out, for example, from the Sowetans report, is that the father of the 3 babies, of the 5, says that, you know, he's not going to forgive the mother. He simply doesn't understand why the children are left alone. And he had warned her about this previously. And also you listen to some of the community members who are saying there must be harsher sentences here that are meted out to these 2 mothers. Is it just simply an issue of negligence on the part of the mothers, or should we be having a broader and much more difficult discussion here?
So you are absolutely correct. I think it's a very complex situation. There are systemic challenges that we faced with. Yes, we cannot justify or condone the negligence and recklessness of the 2 mothers. We know that actions have consequences, and we would not have been faced with this tragedy if this was prevented. However, one also needs to look at the situation more widely in relation to the communities, the context in which we are surrounded by, because often we find that communities do not show an interest or have not made it their business to look out for other children. As the father has indicated, that it's not been the first time. So this seems to have been a pattern of behavior. And surely living in shacks means people are living so closely next to each other. And they must have noticed that children were left on occasions on their own, unsupervised, unmonitored. And certainly this would be an opportunity to report it to the authorities. But I think it's also important for the communities out there to be made more aware, conscientized on the fact that it is each and everyone's responsibility, according to the Children's Act, Section 110, which speaks to children who are subjected to any, if there's any suspicion, negligence, doubt, or inkling that something is happening to the children, there's an omission or a commission of an act, certainly is a legal obligation to report it. And failure to report it constitutes a criminal offense. So the fact that people have been complacent means that they are also complicit. And this is something that we need to address. But we also need to address the broader issues here. We can see that there are 5 children very closely, in their age ranges. So the mothers have had children closely, probably young mothers as we see, and not having any support structures, living in isolation, not having access to any kind of resources. Something that needs to be addressed is, of course, the awareness raising. We know that parenting does not come with a parenting manual. And again, around the protection, prevention, looking at issues around the risk, placing children at risk, and how to protect children. These are issues that need to be addressed before mothers actually give birth to children, and ongoing support where there's easy access, online zero-rated telephones support, where they could actually reach out, and even within the community where they can have access to that kind of support, but also in terms of skills development, upliftment, empowerment of mothers and women in general. So the community needs that kind of opportunities, that needs to be enforced, and there needs to be that kind of support provided.
So what then, in your view, Dr. Omar, is also causing communities to not look after the children? Because when we grew up, we were told it takes a village to raise a child. Is it because people are so compounded by what they're going through that they simply don't have the mental capacity to look at the neighbor's child, for example?
Indeed, and it's more than just mental capacity. I think it's also a question of survival. It's just a loaf of bread to put on the table. How am I going to provide for my family tomorrow? So I think that's where people are fixated and stuck in the whole mechanism of survival, and that doesn't allow room for them to even look beyond their own existence and their family's survival. And this is when we speak. I alluded to the fact of resources, upskilling people, creating opportunities for recreational outlets. Living in shacks is not conducive to healthy growth and development for any family. I think the reality is children don't have room for growth and fun and play. There's no opportunities living in that kind of disadvantaged situation. So it certainly compromises many people. We cannot justify. There should be consequence management. However, at the same time, one needs to look at the wider issues and look at how can we reinforce and galvanize support for communities so that they don't find themselves in these kind of situations.
And Dr. Omar, then there's another story that I'd like us to just look at very briefly. I mean, it's around the devastating scourge that we're seeing emerging now of suicides that are emerging in some of the communities. The Sowetan, for example, reporting today that at least one person is admitted to a hospital in Tsakane a day for attempting to harm themselves after allegedly consuming poison in separate incidents. What's going on here?
Well, I think this, if we just cast our mind to more than 15 years ago, we found that children were self-cutting, self-harming, and looking at other children, it was this copycat approach, the mimicking. And of course, children are strongly influenced by peers. They leave great impressions on their age mates. Something that we need to be aware of is that there seems to be a lack of problem-solving skills, coping skills, or coping mechanisms. I think our focus on the academia is emphasized far too much. We need to focus more on the life skills orientation around the practical issues of how to cope on a daily basis, because there are so many stresses that children are faced with, whether it's load shedding or whether it's COVID or survival.
And the issue of survival is quite a critical one. Thank you so much for your time there as that picture froze. But we did get a sense of what Dr. Omar was actually saying on this one. That was the Teddy Bear Clinic clinical director, Dr. Shaheda Omar.